Hey, it's Zero to Pass, Nubatama Third Eye Facebook page, coming back at you with more premium Nubatama Jamyocongo Cardfight discussion. So, I've been playing a lot, and yeah, as much as I can, and the deck's been doing really well, as I've said in some of my other videos. I've been pretty happy with it. So, a few things that have been happening. Just to go over a few highlights here. Today, this discussion, just to cut to the chase, is going to be about figuring out what are we putting in this other grade 2 slot. So it's been Ungai, it's been Miyabi, Tamahagane 1.0 was in here for a second. I'm thinking about Zangetsu, I'm thinking about Gale. It's definitely a tech slot at this moment in time, but there has to be something here that's just better than anything. So that's what the deck's going to be about, or this deck discussion is going to be about. However, I just want to give you some highlights. So from DBT01, Tribash has just been a phenomenal addition to Jamyocongo. As you guys know, I was playing Jamyocongo Zarzan vanilla build to get onto the grade 3 Cray, so that on my third turn, I would go into this and have a grade 3 in my soul, getting him fully online. We can cut all that out and just use Tribash. As long as your opponent only has 2 cards in play, you can attack with this first and then attack with your Vanguard. This goes into soul, and now this is online at the end of your turn. So when you play this, your opponent went down to 6. At the end of your turn, they're now going to go down to 4. For example, if they didn't guard. Maybe you went first, you just have this and then this, and you're just swinging twice. They just take it, which is fairly likely. This is now going to be fully online, so that's been pretty good. Yamashibuki has just been phenomenal. I had a play the other day where I had 2 counterblasts down, and I was on Jockey Mesa. I had these 2 cards, and I'm like, well, I don't have a counterblast, but no, I do. I do have a counterblast. It's just hiding in plain sight. With Kamajigus saying, hey, you have a counterblast. I'm here to help. So I had either used Bakurin or Fuki to get a card into my opponent's bind zone, and at that point, Jockey Mesa bounce cards to hand. I put these back into play. I then procced her, forcing my opponent to discard that 1 card from the bind zone, getting my 1 counterblast, and then when I attacked with this, counterblast 1 to pop this back to hand, make some more tokens for the next play if needed, for another Jockey Mesa swing if needed. And so, pretty awesome synergy, right? I mean, who would have thought that Technical Booster 1 after image card based around bound cards would synergize so well? I mean, this is my countercharger, as you know. So anything that requires countercharge, as long as I have something in my opponent's bind zone, this is going to proc, and it's going to help out whatever needs a counterblast. In this case, it was something that generates tokens. So pretty awesome. I've been really happy with that I've been able to take, honestly, some of my favorite cards in Nubatama, such as Kamajigusa, such as Fuki, and even now this card that's become one of my favorites as well, as far as the grade 2s and what it can do. This card is just really crazy. It's Vanguard, Rearguard. It gets up to 19 easily. It spams cards, ETB effects, enter the battlefield, as we call it in another game. But yeah, on placement play. It's just really, really, really good. And yeah, it kind of took the place of Gale for me in terms of a staple that I would have in a deck like this. But again, this Jockey Mesa deck, it does need grade 0s. And so generating tokens, it does that. And so, yeah, I've been looking at very carefully what cards I've been using. I have to say Kirigiri, I haven't procced this yet in the number of games I've been playing. But I know that the moment I take this out, whatever I replace this with is going to be staring me in the face saying, you really wished you were me. Where Kirigiri and Yamashibuki will be nowhere to be found to make tokens. And I'll be sitting there really wishing I had this, and then having to throw triggers at Jockey Mesa. So I do advise keeping this in the deck. If you out there have been playtesting this deck with me, with your friends, just seeing how things go, I would keep this. I'd really keep this. Qatar Getsuni 2.0 has been very good. Helps me get my Tribash, Jamyocongo. Enough said about that. Kamuji Gusa at 4 has just been really, really good. Over Trigger last night was a 5th heal for me. I wasn't going into 6 damage heal, but it did give me an extra turn. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these. I honestly am just going to say if Bushiroad doesn't like change these or ban these, I'm not going to be hurt so much, because honestly, you look at the results of the BSFO and you have top players still topping. So yeah, I'm going to just leave it at that. And we're going to just move on from that discussion. So I don't have Ungai in the deck, so when we go over to the G-Zone, I don't have the original Mugen Lord in here, although he can be really good. I mean, I play against Messiah. Messiah has Volkswagen. Being able to dominate that, yeah, sure, that's great. But do I need to? No. The deck definitely is just focused on Jaku Mesa, Jaku Mesa, Jaku Mesa. Ataga Lord is definitely just backup. It's pretty situational, but it has its place in the deck, definitely. So I have Ataga Lord in here at 4. Remember that play with the over trigger where you restand. If you have 3 of these in your deck, you can then just proc this again. The thing is, the criticals until end of battle. So word of advice to myself, read the fine print. They do tend to be end of the battle effects. So this gets a critical until end of battle. And I believe this is until end of turn, but yeah, this is until end of turn. So this, you could crit stack, but this until end of battle, you can't crit stack. You can't crit stack a Toggle Lord. So, but that's okay. You can crit stack Jamyocongo, crit stack sack Jamyocongo. What am I saying? Jaku Mesa, who's going to be on Jamyocongo. You can crit stack on that. I haven't had to use this. Did I use this once? I haven't had to use this yet. Definitely situational. It is a board wipe. It's gonna give you +1. Keep it in. Definitely keep them in. This I haven't had to use it either, but I've gone over reasons why this would be in the deck, including getting Tribash online. But definitely keep him in. As I was saying in one of my other videos, that this is situational. Yeah, the situation came up 2 days ago, and I'm pretty sure I won the game because my first stride I did go into this and I cleared their field, and that was actually pretty clutch. I had to do that, and yeah, don't have to pay for stride, and it was really, really good. So would not replace that, would not remove that at all. Drachma last night, I think my last game I played with this, it was a Drachma finish. Jamyocongo had my opponent to 4, Drachma took him to 1, Bakurum took him to 0. 0 cards in hand to guard with, yeah. So effectively trying to do what Rene Jamyocongo would have done, but that is a choice restrict, as we all know still. This Abaditashi 1.0 is relevant because you make your opponent's hand size so small that they're going to be, what is it? It's if the number of your opponent's hands is 6 or less, gets +5. Yeah, this is actually throwing a 20 shield to get a 20 to get that GB count up. It's worth it because this one says if your opponent's hand size is 3 or more, 3 or more, it's +5, and if it's 6 or more, it's +10. Sometimes they're not going to have 3; they may have less. So I used it, and the situation came up, and there's a slot in here for this. I definitely would go back and put in our, what is this, Fires Collection 3 Guardian. Very relevant, gets rid of those great pesky grade 1s in the back that are going to proc combos such as involving restanding and re-attacking you. So I definitely would keep that in there. Sashikime has been very relevant because the opponent's hand size is so small. What are you going to do? You're going to discard, or you're going to let me have the +20. This has actually been very relevant because of Jamyocongo. And then Dismal. Dismal's great. You play against a deck that's locking you. You Dismal one of your rear guards, you're keeping one of your lanes open. So, yeah. Unless it's a global effect, you're keeping that lane open. So, and then of course you need You need your tokens still. So the G zone has been faring pretty well, doing pretty well. The question now is, what do I put in for those 3 grade 2 slots? I do tend to have a bit of counterblast up because the deck is so counterblast light. I mean, we went through this before, and we'll go through it again. Look at the main deck, counterblast, where are we? Okay, finally hit one. Yamashibuki, okay, there's one. That's a big one too. Fuki. Fuki is also a big, so these 2 cards right here. It's basically where the counterblast is coming. Yeah, that's it. Yamashibuki and Fuki. Yamashibuki and Fuki. So we have a bit of counterblast play if we want. Jockey Mesa is not, there's no counterblast. Toggle Lord, again, backup, really a backup. The big player in here has been Gilgal and Drachma. So these 2, so there's a pretty good balance of counterblast in the deck. And again, I have my 4 counterchargers in here to try to make sure that I don't go under in that regard. And as I explained there, I had to play with Yamashibuki and Kamajigusa, where I had 2 counterblasts face down, and with Jockey Mesa, I called them back to the board. I used Kamajigusa to countercharge, and then Yamashibuki, when it attacked, I could counterblast again using that to give myself tokens. So really good synergy there. But what's going to go here? So one of the counterblast cards that could go in here, because it is a deck that would like tokens, Zangetsu. And so Zangetsu is going to do a few things here. It's going to give us a token, not 2. It's not going to bounce any cards, but it can give those tokens boost. So it's going to give an extra +5 to our attacks to get us over our threshold. With things like Bakurin, if Bakurin's sitting there, it's 8. You want 5 behind it. That's a 13. That's a magic number. So that could definitely help us. You know, this really could help us. You'd want to be careful. Are you going to spam this out? I mean, if you don't have Yamashibuki in hand, you could use this ability twice. If you have the counter blast to then have tokens, which are boosted, and then you can then fuel Jockey Mesa with. So I would say, yeah, Zangetsu is very much in contention for this slot here. I've been trying to avoid him a bit just because I want to keep the deck balanced with counterblast to countercharge, but honestly, as you just saw, there's only 2 cards in the deck that use counterblast, and a lot of the efficiency engine and a lot of the control aspect of this deck doesn't require counterblasts, which is pretty cool. This is another card that I thought of, or I shouldn't say I thought of, that I ran into when I was just going through all my grade 2s all the way back through basically all the sets, all these cards I have lying around. Continuous. This unit gets +5 for each of your token units. This is on your turn too. And your opponent's turn. Of course it's on your turn. What am I saying? It's on your opponent's turn as well. That's what I'm trying to say. This is continuous. So if you have about two tokens, you got 3 tokens, 19, 24, just sitting there. Your opponent's looking at this like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this? So this helps make a column, very much like Yamashibuki does, becoming a 19. If you have this in the other column, Yamashibuki makes 2 tokens. You have this in the other column, you've got a 19k on the other column with this guy. So as odd as it is, and yes, it's a common, and it's a card that probably never sees the light of day, I've considered it. It's free power, basically. Yeah. So what is this guy even called? Geki Hasai. Never said his name before. Yeah, interesting. So another token card, which we know a lot more, Genkai. During your turn, if you have a token unit, this unit and all your tokens get +5. So this works really well if the tokens have boost, but this also becomes a 14 just for having a token in play if you're not playing with him. When placed, choose one of your rear guards and it gets boost until, if you did not choose this unit, it gets soul charge. This deck really doesn't have much soul Soul Blast costs. We've got Makuro. We've got a little bit here with Gilgal, and that's it. This is not. I mean, oh, and then our one Guardian has a Soul Blast. So very little soul. Again, deck's very efficient with regards to resources. So yeah, this is still really high contention. Genkai. I would not run Genkai before Zangetsu. I wouldn't even run Genkai before him because he's getting +5 for each of them. This is just +5 for if you have one. So Genkai would go out of contention here. So we're left with these two right now. Janjin's very interesting. This card, it's a countercharger, and so when it attacks Vanguard, if you call 2 or more grade 0s this turn, which you definitely can do with Yamashibuki, with Kirigiri, and you're going to want to because of Jaquemesa, he's going to get +5 and until the end of battle. And at the end of the battle, put this into your soul and countercharge. So it goes into soul, effectively soul charge, countercharge. This deck really doesn't need this that much. Now, is it good to have a little bit of extra? Sure, it could be. This is kind of like Genkai in the sense that it's just going to get the +5 once, whereas this is going to get multiple, and this actually is making tokens. So, again, I would probably I would say no before these two. I would say no. Another card that we have which can utilize tokens if we're generating a lot of tokens, more than 2 for Jaquemesa. When placed, retire 2 grade 0 rear guards, draw a card, so he gets a little draw. Till end of turn, this unit can attack Vanguard from the back row and gets +15. So it gets us an extra attack. Jaquemesa's already giving us extra attacks. So Jaquemesa can effectively give us 5 attacks. This would be 6. Not bad. And this is the kind of card I would want to run at a lower number, like 3, which this is. So this actually makes Kirigiri even more relevant because, as I was saying, Kirigiri really hasn't done much for me right now because I haven't needed it. But definitely with him, I would want to have more of the token generators. It's kind of what I'm trying to say. The fact that Kirigiri's in there with Yamashibuki, it just makes it more relevant that I have all those generators. So maybe it's a maybe. So these are cards that I've looked at that are token dependent or that create tokens. So generates tokens, gets big off tokens, uses tokens to get big and allow another attack, and gets pretty decent size actually. So, and now I'm trying to think, are there games where I just have tokens sitting around? Where I've had, and I'm sorry I haven't been recording any videos but of gameplay, but there really haven't been. I mean, it's been very streamlined. Yamashibuki will give me the 2 tokens. I'll use the 2 tokens on Jaquemesa. Do I really ever generate 2 more tokens? Not really. I guess I just haven't had to. If I ran him, then I would. I would definitely want to be, spamming Yamashibuki. So, but the thing is, Yamashibuki generates tokens on attack. So this needs them during your main phase. So the synergy between this card and Yamashibuki is not that great. The synergy between Kirigiri or Zangetsu with this card is what you want. So based on that, based on the fact that this is, let's see here, during your turn, this unit, when it attacks, it's going to make tokens. It's going to make tokens. I'd have to have 2 of him out. This is on placement. I could place this down again with Jaquemesa, so this could proc during the battle phase when it's being placed down as one of those 2 cards being placed. And so, yeah, let me think about this. If I have 2 tokens in play, let's see here. Yeah, I'd have to have 2 tokens in play to fuel Jakamesa, to then pop this back to hand with Yamashibuki. Call, no. Yeah, calling Yamashibuki is not going to matter. It'd have to be Kirigiri. This is going to make it so that I have to have a lot more tokens than I think I'm comfortable with. So definitely something I'd consider. Keep in the back of your mind. I'd consider it over these others. So we'll just put them kind of at the top of the pile here. But yeah, there's a little bit of more gymnastics going on there that maybe I want to do. Whereas this is just really straightforward, as is this. Let's look at a few other cards here before getting to that one. Gale definitely, as I said, Yamashibuki kind of got replaced, or kind of replaced his spot. I could definitely run 3 Gale. Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, draw a card, gets +6 until end of turn. And then at the end of turn goes into Soul and pops a card back to hand. Pretty good at popping things back to hand like Bakurin, Kamajigisa. Yeah, this I definitely would consider putting this back in here. Now, it makes the deck more counterblast heavy. But again, been doing okay in that regard. Overall. Furai is a really good ride target because Furai allows us to get that +1. And it does allow us to pop a card back to hand. What would I want to pop? Bakurin is a GB1, so it's kind of irrelevant. It's really just popping another attacker back to hand. I wouldn't want to flood my deck with this. I mean, I could just tech in the 1 or whatever, but I think I'd rather run Gale over that. But don't get me wrong, Furai is really good in Shiranui in particular, in my opinion. Suo. Now, Suo, this is a card that I've been thinking about quite a bit because it's Jamyocongo focused. On placement, if your Vanguard of Jamyocongo gets +5 until end of turn, and when it attacks, your opponent has to guard with at least 2 cards from hand when they guard this attack. So with your opponent's hand being really, really tiny, this is pretty good. If your opponent's at 5 damage and this is your first swing, they have to guard or hope for heal. And if they got a really small hand already, 4, they're gonna have to pitch 2 for this. Yeah, this is really high in contention here. So that's really kind of a no-brainer. But I've been trying to figure out if there's cards better than this. This is a really odd card that I looked into when I was digging. What is this? Hametsukiba. If your opponent has 1 or less rear guards, this unit gets +15. This would be something that could work really well with, say, like Makuro or Gilgal. But yeah, no. Again, I just kind of went through the library of cards I have lying around and just, it's like, oh, okay, well, we can consider this. Ungai, despite having Mujin Lord or not, Ungai is actually really good because during those attacks that you're doing with Jakamesa plays, if your opponent checks a damage trigger and then you play this back down, you're going to be able to nullify that. So Ungai is definitely still in contention. This helps nullify damage triggers. This is going to help make it so that your opponent has to guard with more. So really, really good cards to consider here in terms of really trying to push through your opponent. Gale's going to be more of a, not necessarily a win more card, but this is going to be a, these might be more of win more cards. This is going to be more resource management in terms of just digging into pieces. So the pieces we want are all really lying right here. So would it be best to just have something here that, like Gale, that's going to help us dig into these pieces? Arguably, possibly. Do we need bigger columns more frequently? That's what this guy would do. Zangetsu, do I have problems getting tokens? Not really. However, this is going to give the tokens boost, so I would say that this is still really, really, really good. So right now, these cards, I would say these 4 went out even over him. And again, don't forget him. I'm going to put him at the top of the stack here, just because it's an interesting common, actually, that might work out pretty well in this deck. So there are other cards too, like Tomahogany. This Tomahogany in particular, where is he at? He's in. This is my BT. What is this? Yeah, BT 13 Nubatama deck. Tomahogany on placement on Vanguard or Rearguard, which is really interesting. But on placement, you choose one of your opponent's rearguards that doesn't have resist, right? So you gotta be careful with that. But you choose one of your opponent's rearguards, and it goes to their bind zone. And so if you have a card that you want to get rid of, like an interceptor, or there's a card, if your opponent's able to do, snap back at you, you don't actually win that turn, you're attacking, you can try to get rid of a problem using this to get it off the board, then using Kamajukusa to get it out of the bind zone and into the drop zone. So Tomahogany 1.0, it's not a bad option. And in fact, I would still consider that an option, especially since Kamajukusa is in the deck and is very active in the deck. Now, there is the other Tomahogany that we got, the Dominate one. We're not really focused on Dominating the deck to that degree, so I guess that would be kind of 2.0. This is 3.0 in a way. But this one here, Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, return to hand. If it was return, your opponent chooses a hand from his or her card, or hand discards it. And if your opponent has 4 or less cards, this is where this is really good. If your opponent has 4 or less cards, this unit gets +5 continuous. So kind of like this card, right? This is continuous even during your opponent's turn. This is a problem for your opponent if they want to try to get rid of it. This likewise. Tomahogany 1.0, it's a little bit more gymnastics going on there. You take the card off the field, put it in their bind zone, then you need a Tomahogany to do that, and then you need Kamajukusa to actually get that card into the discard. This one pops the card to your opponent's hand. They can then choose what to get rid of, but something's going to the discard right then and there. So this is a one-trick pony, whereas Tomahogany, the original, it requires Kamajukusa follow-up. So it's not a bad option, actually. It helps with board attrition if you think you need it. I've been finding I don't need that too much, if at all. I haven't really been finding myself have to attack into rear guards too much. I pretty much am attacking into rear guards if my opponent either checked an over trigger or just they've damage checked to the point where all I can really do is go for a rear guard, which they may or may not guard. So it is an option. It's one that I would put behind these guys here. So, in fact, I'd probably put it right behind him. So, okay, so there's that. So a little bit of field attrition. You want to think about field attrition. And now hand control, which is what this deck is about. So Tengu, I made a tiny little video. I don't know, maybe a three-minute video or something like that a year or two ago. I think it was about 2 years ago. I think it was before all the pandemic. This card with Jamyocongo it's really good. So the way it works is on place Soul Blast 1 and place rear guard. Your opponent can either discard a trigger or you get a draw. So your opponent's sitting there at 4 in hand. Maybe they're sitting there at 3 at hand. Maybe they're 2 at hand because you use Fuki and Bakurin. You then throw this onto the field. It's going to give you a card. So this is going to potentially give you a card like Gale in terms of just resources, digging into what you want, which is here. What you want is here, minus the triggers. You don't want to be digging into those, but of course it happens. But the other pieces here, Vanguard and Rearguard pieces, you're going to want to be digging into those. So this is going to help do 2 things. It's going to help you in that regard, but then the other side of the coin is the hand attrition. So this is potentially better than Gale in that regard because it's helping meet our goal of putting stress on our opponent's hand while giving us resources if they don't want to discard. So Tengu you know, it's an 8K, but it meets two things that the deck's trying to do. All decks want resources. All decks want to draw into cards. But then the other thing is our purpose is hand attrition. That's how we win. Hand attrition. So this guy. Oh, and by the way, you pop this back to hand with Jakumesa. You call this again. Your opponent's having to decide again. So you could potentially draw 2 cards out of this. You can do that with this too, but this is Counterblast, this is Soul Blast. Again, Soul really in this deck, there's not much. There's 2 cards in the G zone that use Soul Blast. Makuro, Gilgal. That's it. There's nothing else in here. Oh, no. Take it back. And I say this because I really haven't been having to use them. There is something else that uses it. My bad. Right here. Kirigiri. See what happens? When you don't have a card proccing that much for you, you forget. So this does use Soul Blast. There is that. We have to be careful with that. So yeah, I try running Kirigiri with KFC, Katargitsuni. No, not Katargitsuni. Kokishigarasu. Katargitsuni is the wolf. Kokishigarasu with this all together. Yeah, you have to run soul charge effects. So yeah, this could be fighting a little bit with Kirigiri. Not so much with the G zone, but yeah, there's that. So a little rewind there on the video. Yes, there is a pretty hefty soul charger in the main deck, but I don't use him that much. And you know, when I put this in the deck, is he going to pop up more? Who knows? It's still RNG, right? So this guy, okay, another really good card with Jamyocongo. So Yamato pays Counterblast 1. Your opponent chooses a card from his or her hand, calls it to rearguard circle, effectively discarding a card at that point. If it's got intercept, great. Your opponent's auto abilities do not activate, which is really good. When it attacks, if your Vanguard is grade 3, this is really funny. When it attacks, if your Vanguard is grade 3, this unit gets +5. So if you've strode and you're grade 4, it doesn't get the +5. It's really silly, actually. It doesn't say 3 or higher. It says 3. I wouldn't think they were trying to make sure, oh, well, no, this isn't going to get the benefit when this is put into premium. I don't even know if they thought that this would be put into premium, they being Bushiroad. But honestly, this is 1 card from hand. There's no limit. Like, there's no limiters on here. It just says 1 place, Counterblast 1. Your opponent chooses a card from his or her hand and calls it to rearguard circle and cannot use auto effects. Your opponent's at 2 cards. Your opponent's at 1 card. You bounce this to hand. You go back down on this with Jakumesa. Your opponent's now at 0. Yeah, this is really, really good. There's no choices being made here like this guy, right? It's just, this happens. It just happens. And we have a decent amount of countercharger in here. I've got 4 of them, 4 Kamijigusas. So this is very much in contention. And I would say more so than Tengu. Yeah, it's really, really, really good in that regard. And so let's think about this though, okay? Before we get rid of Tengu, we got Gale. Who are gonna want more, Gale or Tengu? Yeah, so let's put these all here. Think about that for a second. So we've gotten some cards out of the way. We've got one more kind of special highlight here with another card here. We'll see if it's even worth it just in discussing it. We'll get to that last. And then we have Yabi. So we really like this card. It is a really good card. It's really good to us before when we were on Shiranui, back with Technical Booster, when we had no hand size. This deck, I find I tend to have a decent amount of cards in my hand when I win the game. 5, 6, 7, 8. Like really, just as I'm grinding my opponent's hand down and stalling the game on them, I'm actually amassing resources. So you counterblast 1. When she's boosted, she gets +3. Great. The next part is if your opponent has less cards than you, they randomly bind a card from hand. So what you have to do is stack dump your cards. Basically, if you've got 5 or 6 cards in your hand, you just keep calling them to the same circle until you have less cards than your opponent. It's an option. It really is. You know, if you want to embrace the void of having no cards in hand to that point, you could do this. And there's argument to say that it might be the best option, honestly. So, as a finisher, as a long game card at the end finisher, this isn't doing anything for you at the beginning of the game. You know, in the first few turns. Zangetsu is. This can give you tokens. Ungai, first stride, yeah. I mean, Ungai may have more utility. Suo is limiting your opponent's hand in a way that's similar to her, but isn't requiring counterblasts and boosts, and isn't requiring you to dump your hand. Yamato, counterblast 1, counterblast 1. This isn't forcing you to dump your hand. Okay, it's not getting +3, but it doesn't need to be boosted. And this is not generation break. You can do this whenever you want. So pretty good for hand attrition. Gale, I mean, Gale's giving you cards Gale's not getting you to your goal directly. Okay, this is resource card. It's just helping you dig into your pieces. But I would really, honestly, I'd like to find another piece that complements rather than having to dig into my pieces, if possible. Something like Yamato, maybe. Tengu, maybe. So Tengu, again, Tengu is going to be kind of like this, but also has an ability that's kind of like this, depending on what your opponent chooses. Do they want to lose a card, like Miyabi makes them lose a card, or do they want to make you draw a card like Gale draws you a card? So definitely a really, really good card. And so these two, I would say, are out of contention at the moment. So I'm going to put those here. Okay. Really good cards. Really good cards. But in this deck, you know, this is a resource. And it's also early pressure if you need it. This help fixes against damage triggers. This pressures the hand. This pressures the hand. And this pressures the hand. And resource. This kind of does a little of everything in a way. But it is Soul Blast. Counterblast. Free. Counterblast. And gives, this. Okay. So the last card I want to talk about requires you to have 2 Shura Stealth Dragon on your Vanguard. Well, this is the one stride we have that is Shura Stealth Dragon. Stride this Jamyocongo Shura. So if you stride into this, you can then use this next card, this next grade 2, which happens to be a Legion mate. So auto, Soul Blast. Choose a card from your hand, discard it. When this unit is placed on rearguard, you have 2 or more Shura Stealth Dragon in the original card name on your Vanguard, which you will if you stride into this. You may pay the cost if you do search your deck for up to 1 grade 3 Shura Stealth Dragon in its name, reveal it to your opponent, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. Your opponent chooses a card from his or her buy-in zone and puts it into his or her drop zone. If a card was put in this, this unit gets +2. So Nubatama Jamyocongo. There's a problem here. I wanted to mention this just because we do have search in our arsenal, and this is it right here. This happens to be relevant because we're playing Jamyocongo. The problem is this throws away a stride turn to search. Okay. Now if you know, I mean, you've got a really good. There's just like no shadow of doubt that you're gonna be able to survive another turn. You're just looking at the board. You're like, okay, I've got the hand. I'm gonna be able to do this, and you need to go get this so that you can then drachma, basically. Sure. I wanted to show it. I wanted to be as complete as I could be in the video, but no dice. I wouldn't do this. But it's an option, and it's an option for sure Stealth Dragon players. And so I definitely wanted to share that. Last but not least, what do we put in here? So, last night I was playing, I had Ungai here, wasn't really doing anything for me, could have done something for me, possibly. This actually probably would have done more for me than anything, to be honest. This or this, one of these right here. This would have done more than Ungai for me. So it's one of those situations where I get rid of Ungai, am I going to want Ungai in the future? The really cool thing about Ungai, it resets 100 million to 11. So it's one of the reasons I gravitate towards this card. That one case where I attack with my with my rear guard first before I swing with Yakamesa. Attack with my rear guard. My opponent takes it, they damage check and over trigger and say, oh, okay, well, that's the end of turn. No, it's not. I attack with Yakamesa, I pop this to hand, I reset my Vanguard, my opponent's Vanguard to 11. I don't know anything else in the game that does this. But then again, I don't know any other clans better than Nubatama and Link Joker. And I probably know Nubatama better than, honestly, Link Joker, because Link Joker's got like multiple archetypes. Chaos, yes, okay. But then there's Messiah. Deleter, yes, but then there's Messiah. So I don't, I didn't really play a lot of Messiah at the end of G-Era. I was playing Chaos and Deleters, messing around. But regardless, this is the one card I know of in the game that can do that can reset the opponent's Vanguard to 0 like that during battle. Yeah, it's during battle phase. And so, if this was a main phase effect only, it wouldn't work. But it's auto when placed. So that, or let's see, what do we got here? Auto, yeah, when it's placed. Yeah, it doesn't say normal call, because that wouldn't be a normal call, right? That would be a superior call. This just says when placed. It's Generation Break 1, you're going to be on stride. Yeah, this is pretty crazy.